What's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of Games Up Podcast. My name is Cameron and I'm back from holiday. I hope that you had a lovely week as well. Hope that you got to play some good games. Hope that you've had a good weekend of playing games as well. Let's get straight into the news. The first piece of news this week is that the Xbox Gamescom briefing next week is to be the first place where we will get a look at the Xbox One edition of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, also known as PUBG. The game looks absolutely fantastically good fun. It's going everywhere on YouTube. It's massive in the Twitch spaces. Lots of people playing it because of that community aspect. And so I really can't wait to see what it looks like on the console. I've been looking to get my hands on this for a long while. My little PC that does all the editing for our show probably couldn't handle it. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing what it's like on a console. We're still unsure of the terms of exclusivity on that one, though, so it would be really nice to know that, because we've kind of heard conflicting reports one way or the other. Either way, though, we will get our first look at it this coming week with Xbox at Gamescom. Xbox also announced this week that it is looking to revamp the achievement system. They have said that they want to make a person's gaming achievements feel more significant. I've got to be honest, I'm a little bit worried about this one. I'm a massive fan of achievements. I really like unlocking them. I think they're really good fun. I think they add a sort of meta game to things. And I feel that they've been kind of diluted every time they've been added to. The achievements in Twitch and Netflix and stuff never really clicked with me. But I like the idea of making achievements more significant. I'd like to see maybe more value come of them. I'd like to see them exchangeable for something, for example, or use them to better highlight what somebody's done in a game or the amount of time somebody's put into one. But I kind of feel there's a very soft line to tread here, and I hope Xbox treads it well. Nonetheless, we'll probably find out what that is in, I'd assume, the next Xbox update. They tend to do kind of major updates these days rather than monthly ones, so maybe that'll be the focus of the next one. The second piece of news is that there was a massive No Man's Sky update released this week from Hello Games. The update featured limited co-op play, which was brought to the game only in this update. It was called Atlas Rises and was been teased for a little while in an ARG that's been going on for a while. I've seen some kind of positive and negative reactions to this online. People saying that it's too little too late, people being quite annoyed at this. Although, frankly, I don't think I'm in that same camp. I think this is a really good thing. I don't think there's any real reason for Hello Games to continue supporting this game. It had a, frankly, bungled launch. I can't see any reason why they wouldn't just move on and start again. But the fact that they're staying true to it and trying to be good to that community seems like a very good thing. So better updates, better gameplay, and hopefully it just makes the game more valuable and better as it goes forward. And that can't be a bad thing, right? The next piece of news is that Fallout 4, the Game of the Year edition, has been announced. It bundles all 6 DLC expansions that came out since the game's original release, and the Game of the Year edition will come out in late September. There'll also be the opportunity to pick up another of the special Pip-Boy editions of the first launch of the game, because the demand for those saw them wiped out in minutes. And so they're releasing another batch. Although, be a little careful with those, because I heard some conflicting things that sometimes they didn't fit, or people kind of ended up just setting them up on shelves because they weren't quite as novel as people thought they were. So if you are looking to buy one of those, give it a consideration, because as far as I remember, they were quite expensive. But there is going to be a second opportunity for you to get one nonetheless. The fourth piece of news this week is that Super Meat Boy was announced for the Nintendo Switch, and I think this is an awesome match. It's a hardcore game that has proven it can easily work as a handheld title. The game was available on the PS Vita, of course, where actually it developed a very good following. And it shouldn't be too trying for the Switch's power supply. It should be easily usable in any of the Switch's modes. So this seems like a match made in heaven. And those of you who have a Switch, I would absolutely suggest you pick it up. Super Meat Boy is a really good game, although be prepared to die many times. The final piece of news that you might have missed this week is that the Paris 2024 Olympic Committee is considering adding esports to the roster of events that will take place in the Summer Olympics. There's no word yet on if this is a definite choice, on whether it's a done deal, although the fact that it's in consideration at all is a really, really big thing for esports. Esports have made a really big jump forwards this year with much more recognition from major television channels, much bigger owners of teams for big leagues like Overwatch and so on, and this is another step forward for the community. I'm a little bit conflicted about how I feel on this one. We may have a discussion on it a bit later on when the decision is more known as to what way it will go. But nonetheless, esports are in consideration for the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. And that leads us nicely onto our topic of the week this week. And our topic of the week begins with a look at the weeks ahead, but not the weeks ahead in video games. You see, it's mid-August, which means that summer is starting to come to an end. And as the summer comes to an end, we see more and more big-name movies planting their release dates down so that people will go inside and watch a film rather than go outside into the cold. But something that's dwindled over the last few years is video game tie-ins. For a number of years, we saw movies have a video game counterpart that often gained the reputation for being a bit rushed, a bit last minute, and frankly, a bit crap. But the video game industry has shifted in many ways since then, and I think it might be time that we saw the return of the tie-in video game. And I think that some of the bigger movies coming out over the next few months could have been great contenders for them. So for this week's topic of the week, I'm going to present to you 5 of the biggest upcoming films that really should have had, in my opinion, a tie-in video game. Before we get into the list, bear in mind that I don't intend to spoil any of these films. I'm going entirely on what trailers have shown us. If you've seen it in a trailer, that's what I'm discussing here. I'm not working on any leaks. I'm not intending to get in the way of your enjoyment of any of these films. But without further ado, here's the list. Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner 2049 is the sequel to Ridley Scott's massively respected Blade Runner. It features Ryan Gosling and Harrison Ford in lead roles. Harrison Ford, of course, taking back up the role from the original film in which he played the protagonist of the original Blade Runner. So what kind of game could have fit with this film, I hear you say? Well, I think the answer is obvious. The original film inspired much of the sci-fi that came after it, and one of its clearest examples of inspiration is the Deus Ex franchise. So I think maybe Deus Ex would be a perfect kind of fit for a Blade Runner game. A kind of sci-fi neo-noir detective game. Think Deus Ex Mankind Divided, but less yellow and more of a prequel to 2049 that establishes Ryan Gosling's character and maybe gives a little bit of the backstory of how the world has changed. It would add more depth to a film that is adding to a hugely, hugely respected world, and it could give even more material for a very, very engaged fan base to savour. Friend Request. Now, you might not have heard of Friend Request. It's flying under the radar a bit. The film is the story of a creepy online social media presence and the story of one individual who accepts a friend request from it. So what kind of game would fit with this, I hear you say? I'd like you to picture a one-room VR experience. It's a dorm room or a teenage bedroom or something similar, somebody who's likely to use social media a lot. You have access to PC screens, phones that you can answer, and a bed that you can sleep in to progress the story, as well as drawers that you can open to find notebooks, maybe from school that day, or notes from your friends, for example. The trick here is that through the PC screens you can interact with a social media platform, and through that social media platform you can have discussions with a number of your friends and perhaps this creepy presence as well. Think a kind of mix between Emily is Away, Gone Home, and Five Nights at Freddy's, although with less the jump scares and more the just kind of screen management and creepy aesthetic. If you don't know what any of those games are, I would highly recommend checking them out. Gone Home is a fantastic kind of exploratory point-and-click adventure. Emily is Away is a simulation based on chat rooms, much like AIM or MSN like we had years and years ago. And Five Nights at Freddy's you're most likely to know, but it's a game where you sort of do scenario management of an old children's pizza restaurant with creepy things in it. I think these things could combine really well. I think if you progressed the story and got more details by reading all the little notes and finding out that creepier and creepier things were happening with it, you could actually create quite an ominous feel to this one room, especially if this were in VR and you were getting sort of quite a claustrophobic feel from the one room you were in. Maybe it's very similar to Gone Home in that there's nothing that jump scares you, there's nothing specifically there to actually freak you out, but it's more just about creating an atmosphere and building up what this creepy thing is to lead into the film. Stephen King's It. So you've seen that trailer. Everyone has seen that trailer. It's the trailer that made everyone and their great-grandparents shit themselves simultaneously. Stephen King's It looks scary. It doesn't just look scary, it looks very scary. And what's fun about this is Stephen King's It has looked scary before. Now it looks like a different kind of scary. Much like horror games. Horror games have changed drastically over the last few years, and I think there are a couple that could come together to make a perfect Stephen King's It game here. One of the reasons that It looks scary is not just because of the creepy clown, but because of the suggestion that there's some kind of conspiracy or cover-up with this character. It seems to appear in diagrams and drawings from history, as though it's part of and ingrained into this town. Frankly, that seems more unnerving than just there's a creepy clown walking around, and it would be nice if in some kind of game you could explore the history of this more. Perhaps you don't ever uncover why this is the case, maybe that's left for the film, or films as I understand, to explain to you. But picture a kind of unity between Telltale's The Walking Dead, where you have inventory management and point-and-click puzzle solving, with something like Outlast. A much more scary, much more claustrophobic, much darker and much grittier feeling game, but with the kind of tension and connections that come from Telltale's The Walking Dead. One of the great things, seemingly from the trailers of It, is that there's this group of kids who are going to be vital to the storyline, and their relationships are going to be vital to it progressing. It would be really interesting if you could explore these relationships much like you do in a Telltale game, but with a much more traditionally scary outcome. Avengers Infinity War. So we know Square Enix is doing their own thing, and it will likely be a while till we see it. It was only actually earlier this year that Square Enix announced they were building a partnership with Marvel, so we probably won't see what those games are for a little while yet. We've also seen previous Avengers game concepts that never came to light. If you want to find those, I would recommend looking at Unseen64 and Liam Robinson, who do amazing work in uncovering concepts for games that never made it to the market. In this case, it's the concept for a first-person Avengers game where you see only the hands of the Avenger that you're controlling. I believe they prototyped Thor, Hulk, and Iron Man, and you can see like the gauntlets, the green fists, or Thor's hammer. Captain America might have been in there too. But there is one brand and one type of game we can consistently rely on when it comes to delivering fantastic superhero experiences. Lego. So I'm suggesting this, a Lego Avengers Infinity War game, but make it more like Lego Batman 3. Lots of planets, lots of space travel, a massive, massive sense of scale, and all based on this one major cinematic property. I don't want any X-Men, I don't want any Fantastic Four, I don't want this to be a kind of Marvel what-if game. Just let me play through some of the bigger events in Avengers Infinity War, but with that giant sense of scale that LEGO can do really well. Let me switch between the characters I want, let me play out those battles and those set-piece moments as I would love to have seen them, let me kind of craft my own version of Infinity War, and then let that tease what Avengers 4 will be. And finally, Deadpool 2. Alright, this one's a bit of a stretch as the only confirmed release date for Deadpool 2 is 2018. But I think it's more likely that we'll see Deadpool 2 at the beginning or the middle of 2018, as we know it's already in the middle of shooting. We know that we're already seeing the characters that are going to be in it, with Cable getting his reveal in the last few days, so I feel like we're more likely to see Deadpool 2 in the earlier sections of the year. It makes more sense as that way it's not competing with heavier movies, and the original Deadpool released in this time frame as well, so people might be more likely to have their memory jogged by it releasing in a similar time frame. If that is the case, then we might actually see Deadpool in the next 6 to 9 months, and so I think it's fair game to include it on this list. Now, Deadpool has had a previous outing in video games, and it was okay. Moonrise Studios did a fine job and Nolan North brought a great amount of personality to the character, but it never quite felt like it was capitalising on what Deadpool could bring to a game. So for this time round, I think Deadpool 2 should be something in the style of the South Park games. I want to see much more pop culture references, much more dark comedy, and more side joke gameplay. More little mini games that act as cutaways from the main story in that fourth wall breaking style that Deadpool is so famous for. And frankly, a focus on less hardcore mechanics. This game doesn't need to be about combat, it doesn't need to be going up against Arkham or the Spider-Man game next year, it doesn't need to be carving out a niche as the best superhero game, it needs to be the funniest game that year. And frankly, with the writers behind Deadpool and Deadpool 2, this is pretty possible. Deadpool was one of the funniest films in the year of its release, and I have every faith that Deadpool 2 will be as well. I'd love to see them turn those talents and that comedy to the world of video games, and give Deadpool the outing he really deserves. So those are the 5 movies that are coming soon that I think deserve a tie-in video game. Of course, it's too late in the game for us to probably get one of them, unless they haven't been revealed at this point, and that seems like very wishful thinking. Nonetheless, though, it's nice to think that maybe these ideas are rattling around somewhere, and that maybe they'll come to fruition one day. What upcoming movies would you like to see done as a video game? We always appreciate your comments, and we always appreciate having a conversation with you. If you'd like to have that conversation with us, you can do it on our Facebook or Twitter page. We're at Games Upcast on both, and you can always subscribe to us on YouTube and iTunes. We put an episode out at 6:30 every Monday on YouTube and earlier that day, so you can catch it on your way to work and iTunes. Thanks very much. Feel free to like and share this if you want to. We'd really appreciate it. And until next week, the game's up.